So, we're going to look at solutions today to improve gender parity in all aspects of the music industry, including boards of directors, senior executive positions, festival programming. We'll try and cover as much as we can. With this panel, we'll have the benefit of learning from other industries and what is working there as well. So, let's order. Okay. Keely is to my left, first one to my left. Keely Kemp is the founder and president of CultureCap, and she is also the co-founder of Across the Board, an advocacy movement committed to ensuring gender parity on the boards of directors of organizations that impact the Canadian music industry. Then we have Vanessa Vidas, who's an associate partner with Deloitte. It's the Deloitte's Leader Inclusion Growth and Markets. Her objectives are to advance inclusion within the firm, but also more broadly across Canada. Vanessa is also involved in the 30% Club, which aims to develop a diverse pool of talent for all businesses and whose members are committed to better gender balance in all levels of their organizations. And Catherine Tate, to your far right, has over 25 years of experience in the film and television industries in Canada and the US. She is president of Duopoly and co-founder of Authentic, whose recent projects include Epic Studios with Maker Studios and Save Me for CBC Comedy. Catherine released a CMPA study entitled Women and Leadership, Gender Parity in the Screen-Based Industries, early in 2017. So this is our panel. Okay, so thanks everybody for being here today, and to all of you in the audience. So we really, as I said, want to focus on solutions, and we want to learn from some other industries. So I'm going to start with Vanessa and Catherine, maybe Vanessa in the middle. We want to know what's working. So Vanessa, you work with Deloitte, but also with organizations across Canada. So where do you see things really making an impact?
Well, I think one of the key things I was talking to Graham earlier about, and I think your announcement that you just made is a great example, is we need to get beyond talking about this subject, and we actually have to go to doing something about it. So I'll give a couple examples of what we've done at Deloitte. We do push all of our leaders. Well, one thing we've done is our CEO is also our Chief Inclusion Officer. So the tone at the top is 100% clear. The business leaders that report into him know full well that inclusion is just as important as financial results. So that's one thing we did. Secondly, we've encouraged all those leaders to build up a pipeline of diverse talent, such that when we're identifying our leaders, namely our partners own our business, a little different than the average corporate model, that when we select from that pool of partners, that it is a diverse pool. And that starts at the ground level, from the folks that we recruit on campus to those we promote and those that eventually make it into the partner pipeline. Once they're in the partner pipeline, one of the things that we discovered over the last couple of years is that a lot of that process tended to be favoring men, people who were born in Canada or for which English or French was their first language, and people that were extroverted. And so we stepped back and said, how can we make the process of partner admission more inclusive, such that this diverse pipeline that we're building up has equal chance of being successful and come through the other side? And so we actually changed the process this past year and allowed the candidates to pick the style of interview that they thought that they would excel at. And it yielded different results. We were very proud to announce 45% women as a pool of our partners this year. It was equal within our equity partner ranks, and that was a tremendous achievement, but we're not done. That number will be pushed upwards, and I was talking earlier saying ideally we can stop counting soon. But we're still counting to prove that we're making change, but those are just a couple of the examples that we've done over the last couple of years to drive change within our firm.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Sounds like a very civilized organization.
Yes.
So I'm from the film and television industry, which is a lot less civilized, probably more similar to what independent creators and artists experience in the music industry. I embarked on a piece of research because I was, after 30 years in the industry, sort of shocked that when I go on set, there may be 2 women, generally in costume and makeup. No grip, no assistant AD, no producer, or very few producers, some production managers, and forget directors and writers. So it occurred to me that it was time to do something about that as a woman in the industry. And so I persuaded, RCMPA, by the way, is not the Music Publishers Association, it's the Canadian Media Producers Association. So that's the largest organization of producers. And I went to them and said, if I can raise the money to pay for a study, let me do that work. You don't have to do anything. And so I went and raised all the money to pay myself in order to do a global survey of action that has been taken around the world on this issue in the what we call screen-based industry. So that includes the video game industry, as well as film, TV, and linear digital and interactive digital content. And basically, horrifying, Canada is one of the worst performers, and we are also self-satisfied. We're, the sort of socialist good Canadians. And even though Trudeau said it's because it's 2015, we all pat ourselves on the back. Well, in fact, we do very badly in this area. And so I did the research. Turns out Sweden had, several years ago, made parity in all government funding for feature films a requirement. France had done something very similar in television. And in fact, when you went through all the countries, the European Union, everybody had done something. Even the Americans had done something, though unfortunately they didn't capture Harvey Weinstein in that particular action. And so what we did was, by pointing out that literally, and it goes to the work that this organization does, I think, without disclosure, without data, the problem does not exist. And so part of the exercise is, how do you start to measure, how do you start to call out, and how do you start, just as Vanessa has said, how do you start making accountability part of the process? And so we published this report, and my goodness, it was the easiest piece of work ever. Telefilm, Canada Media Fund, and the National Film Board, which are the major funders of all film and TV, or Canadian-originated content, set gender parity goals for 2020. 50-50 of funding will go to women-led projects. So that's a little bit different. For us, it's producer, writer, director, so 2 of the 3. And those targets, now they're not quotas, but those targets have been set. So that was a major accomplishment for us. So something similar should happen in the music industry.
Right, so there's one example of a concrete action. So it could come from a funding agency where
Correct.
there is a direction. So Keely, across the board, your organization has chosen to really target the boards of directors. So tell us about, first, fill everybody in, because I'm not sure if everyone knows the details of across the board, and then what kind of reaction you're starting to get.
Well, thank you. And thank you. I applaud you guys on your announcement you made today. I think that's a great step forward, great action. Across the board started last February over on holiday with a dear friend who's the co-founder, Joanne Setterington, who is the manager of the Strombelas and owns Indoor Recess. Got a little, email, bing, early in the morning, and it was FYI, and they were announcing a new board of something, and I was like, huh. So that kind of opened up a conversation and a little bit of a fact-finding mission for ourselves. And we went and we looked at 22 industry boards across the country, associations and organizations, all nonprofits. And we discovered that the average was 21% on all of these boards that are seats with women on them. And at our first across-the-board meeting, we looked, there was 10 people in the room, and we said, well, if it was an industry statistic, only 2 of us would be women here. So it's kind of interesting. We came out and we spoke to a lot of people, a lot of board directors and organization managers and executives. We spoke to artists, we spoke to entrepreneurs, we spoke to a whole bunch of people. And really what we heard a lot was similar responses. And everyone, it's kind of the same. It's sure, we all know how to do this, so let's find a way to actually achieve a goal. So we set the target of 50% women, so 50-50 by the year 2020. We figure that gives us 3 years to work on this, and if there's some longer terms on boards, then some regeneration on some of the boards. And plus, it takes time. Like, for example, what Music Canada is undergoing right now is this kind of internal analysis and working with governance and organizational excellence to see what options there are. Like, does it require bylaw changes? Does it, or is it just a mandate that the organization is going to take and move forward? The response has been amazing. I mean, we started in February, and already we're really encouraged. Polaris has already made a commitment to 50-50. The Junos, they had 5 new seats, and 4 of them are women. That happened last week. So there's a lot of things going on. Our mandate is to is kind of 4 pillars. One is advocacy, so advocating for women on boards, transparency, ensuring that when there is a board and there are seats coming available, that the boards make it known to the community that there are positions coming up, and also, perhaps putting a job description there. These are the skill sets we're looking for our board, because a board is an important element. You have to have the skills and the ability to sit on that board, and a stronger board is made up of people with these skills. So what are the skills you're looking for? Training and recruitment. So that's where we're coming from.
Great. Well, that's really good. I'm glad you're getting some positive responses. Vanessa, I want to, so speaking of boards in particular, I heard recently I heard a scenario where there was a board that had put a call out for candidates for election of directors, and of 9 candidates, and this is in music, of 9 names, people who put their names up, there was only 1 woman. So from the work that you've done, and maybe just sort of teeing off a little bit on what Keely has talked about, I mean, where would you begin to figure out what is the heart of that? I mean, how do we change that result if you want to target greater gender parity, but your open call isn't returning the kind of results you're looking? Where would you start to try and figure out what the solutions are?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it goes to the heart of sort of aspirations and assumptions that we make of the aspirations of women in particular. I will readily admit that I'm not an expert necessarily in board composition and gender parity, but I would say, again, your question was asked, like, if it was me, what would you do? And I think companies that are looking to create a more diverse board and to change their board and make it more inclusive, they have to open the aperture of where they're looking. So to Keely's point on transparency, and a lot of times you hear the excuse, right? The excuse of, well, we just can't find any qualified candidates. Where are you looking? And it isn't just posting it on your website and waiting for a response. Like, you have to work the network. The same way that boards have been built before is working the network, but it has tended to be a rather homogeneous network. So how do you ask a female colleague, somebody else that you maybe haven't had this conversation with, do they know anyone? Do they know anyone? You have to be much more proactive to find the candidates that are not standing right in front of you. And I think that's a key effort that needs to be done. And it isn't, people are not necessarily going to know that you're looking for a board member or multiple board members. You've got to go out and hunt them down and look for them and convince people that they do actually have the required skill sets, right? There's a lot of research out there that even with a job description, a lot of women read a job description, and unless they can do everything on it and do it really, really well, we don't apply. I've done it myself. I've looked at a job description and say, nope, that's not me. Put it away. Don't even have a conversation with anybody about it. And I think it's critical to educate people that you actually do have a deeper skill set than you think you know.
One of the people that I interviewed is probably the 3rd most senior person at Rogers, who happens to be a woman. And when I asked her, what do you think, what would be the single action, if there was such one action to be taken to change the situation for women on boards, she said, all boards should be mandated to hire when they hire their next CEO to hire a woman. Because at the end of the day, men are invited on boards because they have P&L responsibility and they've been in the C-suite. And that's where it starts. It's actually C-suite experience that, certainly in the public company realm. So I've served on several public company boards. I've been the only woman in the room. I'm currently serving on the board of Paul Bronfman's company, White's, because I thought, where's the real problem in this industry? It's right at the crew level. It's at the guys that are loading the trucks. So I'm on that board, I'm the only woman, and I'm working with Paul to try to transform that company and that industry by encouraging young women to get to join early on. But unless you have a succession plan right up to the C-suite, it's useless. It's all of that, job descriptions. And quite frankly, a nonprofit is a place where women can, in fact, get some experience so that they could eventually be on the public company board. But I mean, even looking at your 3-member companies here, they're all run by men. I asked if are they all white men. I was told, no, they're not all white men. But that's a problem. Your CEO's a man. This is a problem no offense. What is the succession plan? How are you going to be really revolutionize things? It's only when you start hiring women in the C-suite. There was an interesting event in New York. I live in New York, and Judy McGrath, who was the head of MTV and a very senior person at Viacom for many years, somebody asked her the same question. How did you make it into the C-suite? And she said, the explosion in the industry with cable channels happened all at once in the 80s, and there were no men left to hire. So they hired some women. And she said, and I was one of the lucky ones that got hired. But that's kind of how it's been in our industry. If you look at women in the senior positions in the television industry, they are all on the cable side, or what we call the specialty channel side. Bell, Rogers, Shaw, or now Chorus, no women.
Keely, do you think that is something holding back the organizations that you're talking to, the music community in general?
I have heard a little bit of that in terms of, the music industry is a little bit different. Most of the C-suite executives are probably in this room today. There's smaller companies and whatnot. But I think, a lot of the boards might be looking for owner operators or C-suite kind of executives. Yeah. And yet, what's sometimes required for the board might be a different set of expertise that has nothing to do with that, such as marketing expertise or digital expertise, those kinds of things. So I think there's an opportunity to broaden the skill set at the table on a lot of boards, because that would only make a stronger board.
Mm-hmm. Vanessa, what would be your recommendation? If you think that there's a cultural shift that is needed in an industry or in an organization, do you have some experience in addressing that issue?
Yeah, certainly. At Deloitte, I've been there for 19 years, and I have seen a cultural shift. Sometimes they do take that long. There's no magic wand to enact one. Passage of time is part of that. But I think with this sort of issue, we cannot, women have been waiting for so long for the iceberg to shift, and it's just taking far too long. And so we're trying to engage a broad group, and it's fantastic to see such a broad group in the room today thinking about this subject as to how do we tackle the problem. And I think culturally, within a corporation or within a firm, when you have people like the Harvey Weinsteins that are on the extreme edge of being non-inclusive people, that's being generous, you have to remove those people from your organization. And in the same way, when you have people that are extremely inclusive and are fabulous leaders, amazing role models, are doing all the right things, you have to promote those people. But you can't just reward and punish at the fringes. You have to do more to create a culture that when you are an inclusive leader, when you build diverse teams, when you create an inclusive environment around you, that's what is going to get recognized. And hopefully those leaders are doing it, not just because they see it as the right thing, but they actually see that it's yielding better results, right? That the diverse teams are coming up with better ideas for your clients, that they're working more effectively together. We did some analysis recently that told us that our more diverse teams are actually amongst our more profitable. So if that doesn't cause our leaders to wake up and pay attention and say, hey, wait a minute, maybe I will try this crazy idea of building a diverse team. Right, so that's one of the things, is whether it's feeding in facts and data, the rewards, the punishment, the encouragement, training is required, not necessarily to be mandatory diversity training, but something that helps educate people and bring them along the journey. And as I said before, tone at the top is absolutely critical and cannot waver.
Those are great tips. And so to throw out just one of those, an objection people may face, I mean, how do you answer if someone says, well, by encouraging more inclusivity, you're discriminating against, let's just say, white men? How do we respond to that? Who wants to weigh in on that?
Boo-hoo.
No sympathy from
I'm just
Catherine.
gonna add one,
All right.
I just want to add one point to Vanessa's tips. Google has, and Harvard also have amazing program for unconscious bias training. So and you can go on the Harvard website and take the unconscious bias test, and you will be shocked. You think you're the most liberal person on the planet. Guess what? You harbor horrendous bias that you're not even aware of. LGBT, race, whatever, ageism. And this, we all have this quality. We want to be with people that look and sound and smell like us. And that's the problem. So when John Landgraf, who's the CEO of FX, 2 years ago looked around and he saw, all around him, the showrunners, and there were 5% women and people of color. And he said, this has got to change. And he, to Vanessa's point, at the top said, I'm not green lighting any projects anymore unless you can show me 50% parity on gender and African Americans in that case. And he did it. And they produced a whole pile of shows. And to your point, FX won more Emmys the subsequent year than ever before. So to the question about, discrimination against white men, well, sorry, our time has come, is what I say.
If I could just add to that, I think what men are experiencing is something that, I call it the erosion of privilege. So many men and white men in particular, white, straight, able-bodied, cisgendered men, have experienced a privilege that had been afforded to them largely for that reason, right? It's the same reason why taller people make more money. It makes no sense, but they just do, right? And it's just genetic. They were born with that height gene.
I know. I was thinking the same thing.
Sorry. It's a proven fact. But I think that's the thing, is it's not a discrimination that's going on, I don't think. I honestly believe it is an erosion of privilege, and that's what people are feeling. And it's important to recognize that feeling, but also try and be part of the solution. I would argue there's just as much opportunity for inclusive, straight, white, cisgendered, able-bodied men that are inclusive, as there are for women, for people of color, for LGBT, etc. There's so many options out there. Let's grow the pool. It is not a zero-sum game where all of a sudden 50% of projects are getting green-lighted for women of color. The other 50% is still for white guys. Like it's not that people are asking for, I'll say, quote unquote, more than their fair share. They're asking for equality. And if we all have a gender and we all want equality, shouldn't we all want the same thing?
Great. Keely, I want to give you a last word on this, and we may have, I don't know if we'll have a time for a question from the audience, but I was just wondering, gender parity is your primary concern or target. Have you discussed other forms of diversity out across the board?
Now we're a single kind of purpose-driven organization right now. I mean, we just really want to see the 50-50 gender on the boards. And, by 2020, but I think we're going to get there so much sooner. Like everybody in this room wants the same thing, and it's just how do we get there? How do we help get there? So, sure, we'll get there, and then maybe we'll look at something else. Who knows?
Hey,
Or maybe we'll just go job well done, everybody.
You'll have to set a new target in 2018, maybe, for sure. We have 5 minutes, so I don't know if
I
someone
actually want
wants
to add one point
Okay.
that hasn't been mentioned.
All right, Catherine.
Because I've just been thinking about the music industry, about which I know nothing. But one of the big issues on film and television and video games is the portrayal of women. And we haven't touched on that. And that's a much harder piece of unbiased discrimination, or actually biased discrimination. And I was thinking about the music industry and how women are portrayed in the music industry, or especially performers. And I'm thinking to myself, actually, it's a problem. And how do you get to that as well? Because at the end of the day, you want to be educating your audience in a way that will promote and foster good feelings about when young girls are looking at the image on the video game that they're playing, so that they don't necessarily aspire to be, Grand Theft Auto prostitute hacked off head.
Are there best practices in film and video games? Are there things that are
yes,
working?
And there's a big organization on the video game side out of San Francisco that's addressing it. It's a real problem, though. I mean, and there's all sorts of monitoring, but at the end of the day, it's a little bit it's not a virtuous circle; it's a reverse of the vicious circle of men wanting to have that experience and that thrill of power and privilege that Vanessa described.
You really just have to look at any musical performance, whether it's on award shows or concerts that you go to. The men are all fully clothed and the women are pretty much wearing bathing suits. Is it for their own comfort? I don't think so.
So we have lots to think about from this panel today. We have 3 minutes now. We have time probably for one question. So if someone urgent or quickly puts up their hand, we'll throw it. Yes, Jackie.
Absolutely, and it's funny, I was having this conversation with a male colleague over lunch. I grew up in the firm. I've had two of my children, while working at the firm, took 2 maternity leaves. My children are now 16 and 18. And people would say to me, women would say, I don't know how you do this job and have kids. And I said, you just figure it out. I said, you have to go home and pick them up at the end of the day. It's the law. You have to, you have to feed them dinner. It's called providing the necessities of life. And if you want to hang out with them a little bit more than that, then great. And you'll have a wonderful relationship that'll last you long beyond your career. I think we're seeing the change. I firmly believe the organizations that cater to the needs of working parents of dual career couples are the ones that are going to win the talent wars. If we are choosing
excuse me, again, in the independently individual sole proprietor business, which is 99% of the people in the film and TV and music business, there is no maternity leave. People work 24/7, and we know, for example, in the film industry, that there are women attend university in equal numbers to be directors, writers of film and television properties. They make their first short films and win as many awards as male directors, writers, for the first 10 years. The minute they get to childbearing years, because it's a contractor, self-employed business, brutal, seasonal work, and it's great in companies like Deloitte where they can help and support and people can take maternity leave, but many places that's not the case. And that is the single greatest issue that you've put your finger on, and it is nowhere near being solved.
Yeah, and I think it's a shift that we're going to see in society, though, that more and more men will take time off with their children, paid or unpaid, that the careers of women will no longer spend the majority of their time as caregivers within their families. We'll see a parity hopefully emerge there. I look back simply and say, my father was not in the room when I was born. My husband was in the room when my children were born, and I believe when my children have kids that their partners will play an equal role in parenting their children through to adulthood. We do need that societal shift to change, and we need this old stupid rules of FaceTime in an office environment to just drop off the table, and we're seeing that within Deloitte for sure. But I totally hear what Catherine's saying in terms of entrepreneurs and independent people. You do not have that luxury of having an organization around you to support you, and you've got to figure it out the best you can. But it's a big challenge.
Well, thank you, everybody. We could talk, as you can all imagine, for a lot longer. And, I just think it's easier to do things the way they've always been done. So for any organization in our industry, in film, across Canada, that is addressing these issues, I think it's fantastic. And I do believe, as certainly as Vanessa does, I'm very optimistic. I think Keely's optimistic. Catherine, we're going to make you really optimistic by the time you leave here today. Yes, but we are starting to see some change. So thank you very much. On behalf of us, we have made a donation on behalf of each of our panelists today to the Unison Benevolent Fund, and that's our way of a gift and for thanking you for being with us today. A round of applause, please.
Thank you.